Everybody, Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I'm really excited to have Nicole Alexander, and we're going to be talking about her book. It can't be more timely than, what a time to have a book out. Just to read it out, it's Ethical AI in Marketing, Aligning Growth, Responsibility and Customer Trust from Kogan Page. Nicole, thank you so much for coming on and spending the time with me today. Really appreciate it. Where can people find you?
First of all, Tim, thank you for the invitation. I'm so excited to be here with you. People can find me on LinkedIn under Nicole Alexander. They can find my book. It's published it's available wherever you prefer to buy your book. The audio will be coming out in August of 2026. But right now it is available Barnes & Noble, Indigo Books, Walston's, etc., as well as Amazon. So
excellent. Let's get in and first question, what inspired you to write Ethical AI in Marketing and why now?
So for me, it was a bit of a no-brainer. Thankfully, it was a no-brainer for my publisher as well. So I spent the last 25 years in marketing, sort of full stack marketing, from early digital up to branding, market research, quant qual, and most recently, I was at Meta as global head of business and product marketing for 3 years. And simultaneously, I also teach as a professor of marketing and technology, previously for NYU for about a decade. And currently I'm at Columbia University. So the nice part of that is I get to see both the practitioner side as well as the academic and more research heavy side. And one of the things that's always been an interest to me, both in work and in research, is the implications of technology on organizations as well as the halo effect onto society. So I looked early on, my research was on data, analytics, social media, up until recently with the advent of advanced analytical systems and AI. So one of the things as a practitioner I saw was that many times, no matter what technology is coming to the forefront across history, especially with AI, we're seeing this much more prevalently, is there's this fast adoption of we must adopt it. We have to use it. We have to be knowledgeable, and it will be efficient and effective, right? That's the conception. And many times it is not efficient. It's not effective. It doesn't save you money. It doesn't save you time. It may in the long run, but there are, short-term investments that have to be made. And I saw a lot of my colleagues implementing AI and not really understanding the systems they were implementing and all of the harms and the cascade effects that ended up being shouldered by employees and by customers, and obviously extrapolating that onto society as a whole. So I really wanted to develop a manual to a certain extent of something that I wish I myself had early on, as well as something that my colleagues could use to understand, number one, just talk about what responsible AI is. And to me, that's having a baseline in ethical AI, right? Because responsible AI is your go-to-market. Ethical AI are the values that your organization, your business unit, you live by. So having a manual to really talk about what are the different systems that are available, what are the outcomes you're looking to achieve, and understanding how to go about implementing AI, if AI is the right solution, in an ethical and responsible manner. So I saw the need. Thankfully, a lot of marketers agreed with that need. And I've had a lot of good pickup, particularly in helping with folks with frameworks on what can they bring into their organization tomorrow that really helps them to understand if they should be using AI or AI for different use cases.
We'll come onto your framework in a bit. Question, if you were to summarize your book in one sentence for marketers, what would it be?
If I were to summarize it in one sentence, I would say it would be how to understand your customers better utilizing technology. And I say that purposely because I'd rather talk about technology as a whole than just AI, because many times people don't understand the systems that AI sits behind.
Yeah.
And I'd rather it be a technology question than an AI question to eliminate some of that bias and leaning into AI. So I would definitely say it would be marketers being able to utilize better customer insights, conversations through the opportunity of technology.
In your experience, what are the biggest ethical challenges marketers face when implementing AI today?
There are many. I think first and foremost, the biggest ethical challenge is understanding what your ethics are.
Yeah.
And many times, there's not a one size fits all, especially for enterprises that are operating globally, right? So you're operating in multiple regions
Yeah.
with different norms,
Mm.
different cultural histories.
Singapore will be different to New York, to
Exactly.
France.
A Western mentality of ethics is different than an Eastern mentality of ethics, right? And there's never usually just one. It's usually looking at different ethic philosophies and putting them together and really understanding when to lean in and when to not. So I would think that it's understanding ethics in general and having a stance as an organization on what you allow, what you disallow, and where that line is drawn, and making sure that you're not toggling. So that would be the first biggest thing. Secondly, it's then translating those ethical principles into your responsible AI strategy, which is your go to market. How do we operationalize our ethics into marketing, into product, into finance, etc.?
So how can companies balance growth objectives with the need to be ethical and responsible in their AI-driven marketing?
So I like this question because one of the biggest shifts that I think we need to make in marketing and in business as a whole is looking at short-term gains
Mm.
over long-term relationship building with long-term growth. And many times, a lot of initiatives that come out of marketing are looking for those short-term gains versus building long-term, brand equity, trust amongst existing and future customers. So understanding that growth is not a means to an end. So many times you're optimizing for short-term metrics, right? So things like cost per acquisition, but having a short-term, really low cost per acquisition, and then that hindering your overall customer lifetime value in the long term is an oxymoron, right? So you want to really think about how are you going to adhere to shareholder value in the short term, but how are you going to really build trust over the long term? And to me, what we've seen in research is it's about having a stance in how are you operating in an ethical manner. And that's everything from data collection to data utilization to how you are communicating, what the contextual sensitivity is on how you go to market in, as we mentioned, the US versus Brazil versus China. So really having a concrete understanding amongst not just your CMO, but amongst all of the executive leadership team on where you stand, what the principles are, and how that actually translates into how you operationalize.
So let's talk about your framework. So you outline the PACT PACT framework in your book. Can you explain what it is and how marketers can apply it?
Absolutely. So one of the things I wanted to do is to move from just a philosophical
Yep.
perspective of ethics to, okay, well, what am I going to do tomorrow to change the way that marketing teams operate? So normally, having a framework, or many companies call it guardrails, right? Having something that you can solidify and use within your team, but that can also be used in product, in engineering, in a trust and safety team, depending on how your organization is utilized. I did research and built off of Luciano's previous framework that was a little bit more philosophical and implemented a PACT framework. So PACT stands for personalization, accountability, contextual sensitivity, and trust. Trust is an interesting component because it's a standalone part of the framework, but it's also the output of getting the P, the A, and the C correct, right? So for long-term growth. So personalization asks questions around, are you personalizing because you as a company and a marketer feels the need to personalize because you have the ability to, or is it actually adding a net higher value for the end customer? Sometimes the answer is personalization is a benefit to both the company as well as the customer. Sometimes, though, and this has a bit to do with transparency, personalization has a creepy factor. Sometimes when you see something personalized, you're like, you shouldn't know this about me, right? And that's that disconnect where trust starts to break down. Accountability, I love accountability because it's more than just who do we blame when something goes wrong, right?
Yep.
So it's really thinking about who is the individual that owns this particular element, whether it's a campaign, whether it's a model development, whatever the case may be. And more importantly, who has the ability to stop something if it's not going right, or if something's already out the door and you see that the outcomes or the impact aren't the use cases that you expected, then they have the ability to immediately put a stop on it, whether it's stopping the media buy or the campaign from running or the product from being sold to net new customers, right? Who has the accountability to roll things back? Contextual sensitivity is important, specifically because most of the organizations that I've worked with, they operate in a multicultural, right, multi-regional day-to-day. So most companies aren't just operating in the EU or in the US or in Asia, right? They're operating against a myriad of different societal norms. So having contextual sensitivity really looks at, just because something works within a system in a particular context doesn't mean that it's going to have the same impact when that system is released in different countries or different societal elements. So understanding how to contextualize across different norms is extremely important, especially with AI. And then finally, trust. So every marketer is trying to understand how to build long-term trust with their customers, or any marketer worth their salt. So the goal here is to really understand what are the components that build trust, because it does take a while. Trust isn't something that happens overnight with your customers, but it can be quickly lost.
Yep.
So it's really about understanding if you're getting personalization, accountability, contextual sensitivity correct, then there's a positive halo effect, obviously, that comes onto trust. But trust in and of itself also offers components of, are you consistent? Are you doing what you say, right? Or do you have leadership that says one thing and then your product, your marketing efforts reflect something completely different? So it's a bit of a checklist that offers individuals or marketers specifically a framework to work with when they're looking at vendors, looking at procurement of different solutions. But the goal really is to bring in more early. So when everyone gets together in Q1, right, the top of the year, all the leadership gets together, you go through your strategy. My goal is to really have these conversations be in those strategy meetings, because it should be your foundation before you get into so now we're going to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, we're finding more and more when we have conversations with organizations, we say something like, do you have your ideal customer persona? Do you know it? They go, yes. They say, can you send it to us? They say, no, it's in our heads. And then it's actually only like 5. It's like, no, actually, with AI, you've got this, so we've actually defined an ICP where it's, she's female, she's in Paris, she believes in sustainability. You can actually really, really define it. Anyway, what are real world examples of organizations getting ethical AI and marketing right and some getting it wrong?
Oh, well, I can say I think we've seen many a headline of the folks that have gotten it wrong. I think what we see less and less is when folks are getting it right, because those usually aren't the stories necessarily that hit the media or that call our attention. One of the use cases that I have in the book, and I have several. I have some from Ally Bank, who I think is really, they took a slower approach to AI. And they're really, because again, also they're in the financial sector, which obviously has a lot of oversight and regulation. So they're very cognizant of that. So they've been doing a great job. I also gave an example of the Project Management PMI Institute. But the one that I always like to kind of call out, because I think it goes across pretty much everyone in marketing, is on the creative side. So Adobe Firefly was one of the early adopters of really understanding provenance tracking. So being able to showcase out of its tool for creators to develop creative and implement AI tools and AI generation that pairs with the designers that are trying to create new and interesting things. So they were cognizant early on about implementing provenance tracking both from the back end as well as the front end. So on the back end, they embed a myriad of metadata, tracking information, so that systems, when you upload the creative, it can tell if it is AI generated, AI augmented, etc. But more importantly, for consumers, for customers who are interacting with these pieces of creative, they have a watermark on the front. And now you subsequently see that in a myriad of different language model systems, such as Gemini now uses it. I believe Claude uses it as well from Anthropic. But having that watermark really distinguishes for customers to understand if something was AI co-created. And I think that in and of itself makes a difference to give transparency to the user, right? So you can give additional disclaimers on your website, et cetera. But many times images are lifted or picked up and, screenshot or, used in areas maybe that the original designer did not intend them to be. So having that watermark both on the front and the back is a really excellent way of not only building trust with customers, but to also empower creators to ensure that they are safeguarding sort of their designs, their creative, and communicating with their end audience. So that's one of the ways I think, Firefly in particular, I've seen, use cases where AI has been leveraged, but they're also trying to make sure that it's being used responsibly, not just for the folks that are subscribing to the service, but for the folks that are being the customers of those designs.
So how does ethical AI impact customer trust? And why is that trust crucial for sustainable growth?
So, customers will interact with your product, your solution, whatever the case may be. And one of the things, regardless, one of the best things that you can hope for is if you've done something wrong, right? If you've made the customer feel like they can't trust you because they feel like there's not an even exchange of value, or because they feel like you have in some way misled them, the best thing marketers can hope for is you have a vocal customer that says, I'm not happy because they did X, Y, and Z. And that's the best case scenario, because then you as a marketer have the ability to, in some way, shape, or form, come back and try to do a mea culpa on whatever the issue is. The worst case scenario is when customers just silently go off and they go off to your competitor or whatever the case may be. And you don't have the opportunity to make a change or to, address the issue and resolve it. And AI is much more the latter than the former. So many times when customers feel as though you've used their data in ways that they did not either approve, you don't have a relationship with me enough to know this information about me. And again, it goes back to having that creep factor where you're like, you shouldn't know this, so how are you serving me this? Or if you're serving them something and you're using AI where it doesn't say, these recommendations are based on your purchase history or based on X, Y, and Z. Those are the moments where you start to erode trust with your customers or potential customers. So it's a really low sort of hill to jump over. It's making sure that you have things like, transparency disclaimers on if this is aggregated data, simply say that. And there's a point also where oversharing, we've seen in research where oversharing doesn't work, right? It's really understanding the best communication strategy, which marketers are great at doing, right? We have PR, there's, Marcoms, et cetera. So really talking about how do you want to communicate this as succinctly and as in layman's words as possible. But that trust at the end of the day should be one of the key metrics that marketers are looking at, especially when they're using AI. So if trust isn't a factor, if customer relationship management isn't a factor when it comes to the KPIs on using AI, then that is the first red flag, I would say.
What are the emerging trends for AI ethics in marketing that companies should be preparing for over the next 3 to 5 years? Difficult question, I know.
Oh, 3 to 5 years. It's so funny because if you had asked me that 3 to 5 years ago, I would never have
No, yeah.
predicted where we are today. So I am going to take that question and say 18 months. Over the next
Okay.
18 months, um, I think first and foremost, it's going to be not leaning on the technology to do the job that should have human empathy, if that makes sense, right? So it's about understanding that at the end of the day, you're marketing to a person. Even if you're marketing, to a technology that then in turn is talking to the person, whatever the case, it's an end person. So it's really about making sure that you're still developing brand stories, human connection, empathetic, constraints as a part of how you're leveraging the technology, possibly to do some of that optimization. Um, I think also, especially as we move into more and more of the world of agentic, a lot of folks are having a fun time experimenting with agents. I think there's a viable opportunity there, particularly to lower overall operational costs in the long term, and possibly even enhance customer satisfaction. The concern there is going to be more around security, and privacy and access to IP, especially as we see that agents are not readily available to be trusted, in an open environment within an organization's infrastructure. So they really still need to be housed separately in sandboxes with a minimal amount of access. So I think cybersecurity, data privacy is going to be a massive hurdle as we move forward. And then regulation. I think a lot of marketers are used to regulation, but I don't think that marketers are ready for the level of net new regulation and the baseline that they should be at. So we have the EU AI Act, obviously, that is now actually being implemented here in the US. We have sparse regulation. It's more based on states.
Yep.
California, New York are in the lead from a state perspective, but we see deregulation at the federal level.
Hmm.
So I think as marketers again continue to operate globally, it's going to be a much more pressing issue to understand what their baseline for regulation adherence should be. Just because you're operating in the US doesn't mean that you're operating at the bare bones level. Or do you say, because we're operating globally, we will, no matter who we're talking to, we will always adhere to the gold standard as of today, which is, in my opinion, the EU AI Act. So that's going to be also, I think, a big hurdle moving forward, to really lean into potential overregulation and governance instead of leaning into more ease and flexibility of it being a wild, wild west.
Nicole Alexander, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book, Ethical AI in Marketing, Aligning Growth, Responsibility, and Customer Trust. If I wanted to buy a copy, where can I get one from?
Wherever you like to buy books. I am a big fan of independent bookstores, so
Yeah,
I would
so am I.
recommend going to bookshop.org. But if you are on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or indigo.com, you can also find it there.
And where can we find information about you, Nicole?
Reach out to me on LinkedIn. I particularly love hearing feedback and use cases. Absolutely adore hearing how folks are using AI in the workplace. So yes, LinkedIn / Nicole Alexander.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insight and talking about your new book.
Thank you so much for having me, Tim. I appreciate it.